Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of English 101 online. It was really nice to read your guys' reading reflections and see the experiences that you've chosen for your essay 1, the memoir. So this video this week is going to focus on just a couple ideas that you might keep in mind as you move from your mind map and your pre-writing on essay 1 into your draft that's going to be due this week. So let's go ahead and get started. The assignments that we've got for this week are just twofold. One, a second reading reflection. The readings for this week include another piece from You Writing, a online textbook, a article titled Reading to Write, which is really useful when you're reading, writing, or just doing some critical thinking. And then the third is a memoir example that may help you when you're thinking about your draft this week, called A Day Among the Rest. So I would really recommend starting those readings early and thinking about them, doing your reflection, maybe taking some notes, and then marking down what you like about those readings and if you think there's anything you might want to replicate in your own writing. The A Day Among the Rest really utilizes a lot of dialogue, a lot of descriptive storytelling that I think could be great if you want to, take a little leap and try some of that in your own writing with the draft that's due on Sunday. So the readings that we had for week 1 were really just an introduction to writing, to sort of thinking as a writer. And so I wanted to give you guys some questions just to think about as you're sort of moving forward in 101. And the first one is, what kind of writer are you? Are you a sprinter, a jogger, a tightrope walker? And what does that mean about your writing process? So if you're one of those people that is a sprinter and you sit down at your computer and you write the entire 5-page paper in 3 hours because you just have to get it done and you hate the process that your writing has, but you just have to do it, you might consider, how you can improve that process. If that works for you, hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But if you feel like maybe you could incorporate more of a jogging or some, more careful planning in your writing, or if you're a tightrope walker and maybe you feel like you just spend way too much time working on writing, then kind of ask yourself as we move through our course, how can I adjust this process so that it's useful for me? Another reading you guys had was What Does the Professor Want?, which really asks you to think about what instructors like me or others that you're working with at SWIC or elsewhere, what they expect from you and what assignments in a college course are really asking you to think about. And I think that the advice in What Does the Professor Want can really be applicable to anything. So hopefully you found something useful there. And then, moving forward, I just want you to ask yourself, what's a goal you have for your writing this semester? And how can you sort of work towards that goal? And if your goal is simply to, pass this class with a C, that's awesome. That's my goal for you too. But if you can be more specific for yourself, what would it mean to be successful in this course? What would that look like for you? I think that can be really useful as you're working on drafting your writing and kind of thinking about, how can this benefit me as a person, as a student, as a writer, and not just, this is something I have to get done. So you also had to read a memoir example called The Day I Was Fat. And this is a good example of a student writing about an experience that changed them and changed their perspective. So that's another great opportunity for you to sort of get inspiration for your own essay. It's a short one, and they really save their main point about their experience until the end, which I think is an interesting way to do it. So when you're thinking back to that story, you might notice that the author has a very clear version of how that experience changed who she was and what she decided to do. And so when you're thinking about your essay 1, I'd like you to do the same thing. Can you think of how this experience has really changed you, has altered your behavior or the way that you thought or the way that you looked at the world? And it doesn't have to be such a traumatic change, but it can be if that's what you choose. So just to kind of revisit to the assignment that we're working on, the memoir is going to be about 3 pages. And I want you to make sure that you're focusing on an experience that has changed you. You need to have storytelling, description, and then also a thesis. So we're going to talk a little bit about thesis writing, but first, some ideas to kind of get you started with drafting. Other than mind maps, which I had you all do this weekend, free writing is a great pre-writing strategy, and this means that you literally just sit down and write. That's probably where a lot of people start. If that isn't comfortable for you, you can try like listing details of this experience, title your list like the day I got my first car, and then underneath it list how you feel like that changed you. Or you can do something called looping, which is what I'm going to sort of walk you through in a second, which means that you free write, but then you sort of take an idea from that free write and use it in a new free write. So it's kind of a different way to look at how do I start. So this is a free write that I did myself about an experience that I have. So I'm going to read it, and then I want you, while you're listening to me read it or while you're reading along, ask yourself, what do you think is the main idea of this paragraph? All right? So one experience that has had a huge impact on who I am is the car accident. I often think of my life in terms of before and after, with the car accident somewhere in the middle. Who I was then and who I am now are no longer the same person. Or are they? I don't know. January 31st, 2021 will be 4 years since I broke my neck. And in some ways, it feels like just yesterday. Then again, I am much stronger, happier, and invested in life now. Before the accident, I think I was so wrapped up in my own worries that I was not aware of how anxious and distracted I'd become. After spending the last few years reflecting on it, I feel like I'm in a better place. So, if you had to choose a sentence here that's kind of giving you my main idea, some of you might say here, then again, I'm much stronger, happier, and invested in life now. That sounds like a thesis, yeah? Or maybe after spending years reflecting on it, I feel like I'm in a better place. I think overall, maybe a combination of those two. Maybe my main idea is just that this car accident had a negative effect at first, but maybe now it's more positive looking back. And so that might be what the rest of my essay focuses on. So if I were doing something called looping, I would then take whatever sentence I choose, probably this, then again, I'm much stronger, happier, and invested in life now. And then I would use that to start my writing about this experience. So when you think about the main idea of a free write, that often is your thesis. It's what you're arguing. It's like your point about this topic. So one of my colleagues has a good way of describing it. She says that your thesis is your topic and then the what up. So you have your topic idea and then you have why is that important, or so what? Why does that matter? So in this essay, I want you to think about how this experience has changed you. And so your topic is the experience, and then your thesis, the so what, is why was this important? Why did it change you? How? So a few things to keep in mind about thesis statements. They're usually given at the end of your first paragraph, though not always. So some of you have probably gotten in the habit of doing what we call 5-paragraph essays, where you have your introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and then your conclusion, like a little sandwich, right? And when you get into college writing, you'll start to understand that those are probably a good place to start, but I want to encourage you to break out of that mold. And maybe for you, your thesis makes more sense to have it at the end. Maybe your thesis makes more sense to have it in your 3rd paragraph as opposed to your 1st. But if you're one of those people that's like, I need rules, then a good rule of thumb is it's usually at the end of your 1st paragraph. It's usually 1 to 2 sentences, and it should be clear, unique to you, and debatable. So not everyone who reads your experience should agree with what you've decided about it or should feel the exact same way about that experience, if that makes sense. So something else I see is that a lot of people like to end their introduction with a question. And although questions can be a good way to sort of draw people in, they're overused in my opinion. And so you want to sort of push yourself to answer that question. So let's look at some examples. This first thesis says, this experience in college has changed my life. And the question I have up here is, how would you improve this? So if you remember from my last slide, we want something specific, debatable, and let's check what I said. Clear, debatable, and specific. So this first one, I might argue that this isn't very clear. I'm wondering to myself, what experience? Maybe changed how? If I don't have those who, what, when, where, and why questions answered, then I'm kind of left thinking that could be about anything. The second one says, working out's been a great stress reliever. So this might be true, but I don't think it's very debatable. I mean, most people would agree that working out relieves stress, but is that really the change that you want to focus on? If you maybe said instead, working out's been a great way to relieve the stress I've experienced from going to school, working, and being a mom all at the same time. Now that's a little more specific. And then this last one, how did quitting my job have a major impact on me? Well, my feedback would be, can you turn this into a statement, not a question? Answer that question. Quitting my job, majorly impacted the way that I view myself. There you go. There's your thesis. So I want you to keep that thesis in mind throughout this drafting process this week. So what I found most effective for a lot of people is you want to have your thesis in mind when you start, but understand that it can change. So if you get to the end of your first draft and you look back and you read over what you've written, and you look back at your thesis and you think to yourself, maybe that's not really the point I'm going for, then I encourage you to adjust it, to change it. So a lot of people will, feel like, oh, I wrote this thesis, now that has to be my point. But it really doesn't, because writing is what we call recursive. It changes as we do it. So the more that you write, the more that your writing will change. But some things to keep in mind: ask yourself if you're supporting that thesis, if you're staying on topic. And if you get to the end of your draft and you read it through and you're like, oh man, I'm not staying on topic, then maybe your topic needs to adjust. See if you can involve some storytelling, some dialogue, some description, really make this experience come alive for me and your reader. So I'm hoping that these tips will be good to keep in mind this week while you work. If you have any questions, please don't be afraid to reach out via email or Microsoft Teams. I'll have your mind maps and your reading reflections graded here shortly, and hopefully that feedback will get you kind of started on your drafts. So thank you guys. It's been great to meet you so far, and I hope that you enjoy your week and drafting these memoirs.